when lots of times maybe just not doing anything and just letting life run its course would be the better perspective. And that's always a challenge. And here's a great greens complex. This is Baltimore Country Club 5 Farms course, a Tillinghast golf course, and just the simplicity of a golf course approach is a little variety. Now, I base golf design in general on this term here: form follows function. The shape of a building or object should be primarily based upon its intended function or purpose. If golf course architects followed this thought process, we could build golf courses that are a lot less expensive and more playable as well. Louis Sullivan is a building architect from the late 1800s out of Chicago who actually gave Frank Lloyd Wright his start. It is the pervading law of all things organic and inorganic, of all things physical and metaphysical, of all things human and all things superhuman, of all true manifestations of the head, of the heart, of the soul, that the life is recognizable in its expression, that form ever follows function. This is the law. So whatever your function is, whatever you're designing, whatever that function is, the form of that should reflect its intended function. And it's very true in golf course architecture. So let me compare two things. Let me compare design versus decoration. There are a lot of golf course designers out there, and a lot of them really should be golf course decorators. You've got architects and you've got interior designers, but there are a lot of golf course architects that maybe should be considered golf course decorators. What is design? Design, to work out the structure or form of something, as by making a sketch, outline, pattern, or plans. Having a plan in life is a pretty good thing. Decoration is an addition that renders something more attractive or ornate, adornment, embellishment, sand, waterfalls. So let's compare two pictures. Let's compare a golf course in China, one of the Mission Hills golf courses. It's a dogleg left golf hole with bunkers on the inside of the dogleg and bunkers on the outside of the dogleg. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sand bunkers out there. And around the green you see four bunkers. Decorated very nicely, right? Then if you look to the right, if you look at Ron Willard's Water's Edge Country Club here, somewhat straight of the hole, but just a slight dogleg. Strategically, there's a slight dogleg left there. But you see just 3 bunkers in the fairway and 1 bunker around the green. Just as strategic, just as challenging, but a lot less penal, a lot easier to maintain. Regardless of the bunker shapes, there's 4 bunkers here versus 12 bunkers there, and a lot more playable for the average golfer. Design here, more decoration there. Strategy versus aesthetics, the same thought. Stratagem, a device or scheme for defeating an enemy, especially in war. A trick or plan for carrying out some deception or for gaining some advantage. Gaining some advantage. Aesthetics, the study of psychological aspects of beauty, especially with the components thereof as they relate to appearance. The term aesthetic describes someone whose pursuit of beauty is excessive or appears phony. Okay? A lot of aesthetics out there in the world, especially in the world of golf course architecture. One strategist, Alistair McKenzie. The golfer has the luxury to make choices with the golf shop based upon their mental or physical ability. That's the strategic school of design. And I mentioned Alistair McKenzie because there he is. He's at Alwoodley Golf Club there. Hazards. A hazard should challenge the golfer, not penalize the golfer. Go back to the definition of strategy and stratagem. Okay, what did that say? And that's what it's talking about. Whereas most people, architects or otherwise, think a hazard is to penalize the golfer. And I've heard people say, you need a bunker there because people are always hitting it there. Well, why would you want to penalize somebody like that? This is the same project in China. Almost all my golf courses have central hazards. And if you were to ask me, Rich, what's the best feature on a golf course? I would say it's a central hazard. A hazard that challenges the golfer and not penalizes the golfer. A hazard that a golfer has choices of hitting short of it, long of it, left of it, or right of it. Versus another hazard or two that are on the sides of fairways. that only gives the golfer one choice, and that's hit straight down the middle. So, the general theme for this discussion is less can actually be more. So how do we achieve that? How is great design achieved? What is great design? Anybody want to share a thought or two about how they would define what great design is? Okay, I'll take a stab at it. Bells and whistles. Are bells and whistles great design? Or is it more embellishment? Is it more aesthetic? What are bells and whistles? Well, we know what these bells and whistles are, and this bell tells golfers, actually Yale Golf Club, that the third green is free to play. And that is that's form follows function right there, okay? When we literally talk about bells and whistles. But here are bells and whistles, at least in my mind, and I know in many of your minds. And if we can show the golfer that what they might think is great design might actually be bells and whistles, it might actually be one of the reasons why their green fees are higher than they'd like it. Here's some. Excessive shaping of features and of acreage. We do a lot of renovation work. And I'm afraid now that there's not a lot of new work, a lot of the golf architects out there that have been accustomed to new work are now delving into Mike and I and our realm of renovation. And a lot of that can be considered complete, what we call blow-up of golf courses. And architects and contractors are notorious for just completely redesigning things, even areas between holes that could really be untouched. And if we can minimize our acreage and not have to feel like we have to touch every square foot of a golf course, we can reduce costs. Flawless turf grass from green to tee. I like brown, and I think brown is beautiful. I'm not going to back down on that. I think, you know, what Mr. Howland and Mr. Rehnquist were saying were great things. And we talked about, Chris mentioned, let's not worry about the semantics of things. We all know what it really means. $1 million plus irrigation systems. Again, I look around for George Fisher, wish he was here. Triple row landing areas of irrigation. Sand for aesthetics as opposed to strategy. Irrigating sand bunkers for consistency's sake. Have you heard about this? I feel like Jerry Seinfeld when I say that. Have you heard about this thing here? They're irrigating sand bunkers. One of my projects, Raleigh Country Club, the general manager came to me and said, we've got an issue with a wash in a particular bunker. And we need to do, what do you think? And so I said, well, I'll talk to the superintendent and see what he thinks. And he said, well, yeah, that's probably because our members are making us irrigate the sand bunker to make it more consistent with other sand bunkers. It's a hazard. Raking sand bunkers on a daily basis. Mr. Rehnquist here said himself, they don't rake bunkers in Boca Raton 7 days a week. They do it now 5 days a week. I'd love to see him do it 3 days a week. I once asked Gary Player, what about getting rid of bunker rakes in general? He thought it was the craziest idea in the world. Ironically, he was talking about affordable golf before I asked that question. Rolling and mowing greens on a daily basis. A lot of maintenance practices that could be considered bells and whistles. Curved wall-to-wall cart paths and routine edging of cart paths. Looking for that aesthetic perfection. Trying to keep carts off of golf courses, again, for perfection of aesthetics. Stone walls and waterfalls. And GPS and golf carts. So there's some bells and whistles right there that we could maybe do without. And they're all based on golfer perception, leading to industry reaction. But sometimes I wonder if it's mostly industry perception of what the golfer may or may not want. And we have this survey that we've been doing, the Golf Experience Survey, that's trying to get to the bottom of this right here. What do the golfers really want? And we've had about 800 people respond to this survey, and I'm going to be showing you the results of it tomorrow. And I hope, has anyone here not taken the survey? Okay, Skip, you got to do that. Whoever hasn't taken the survey, please try to take that survey today. We're at 795 respondents, and I'd like to be at 800 in 24 hours. So hopefully the results of that survey will allow us to see, we can take it to the industry and say, we can tick off the GPS people, because maybe people will say we're not interested in GPS, things like that. All right, bells and whistles didn't really occur in the British Isles. Anything went there. And they certainly weren't watering bunkers there. That's just the way golf was, and that's how we all came to embrace the game of golf, because we brought it. Gordon brought it over on the plane yesterday. We brought it over from the British Isles, and they manage golf courses. They don't maintain golf courses, and they're not so worried about how things should be every single day of the year. It's the season. All right, so those are bells and whistles. Let's talk about attributes of the game really quickly. From a design standpoint, here are some attributes of the game that I want you guys to think about and take other places. You know, one of my projects up in Washington, D.C., we aren't fortunate enough to rebuild all the greens, redesign all the greens complexes because we have a space issue. But we were able to do a lot of very interesting recontouring of greens, a lot of 2 and 3% slopes that might not be very visible to the naked eye in general, but they sure are a challenge. But on the other side, interesting greens contours, that if we could slow the speed of the greens down, we can recapture interesting green contours. Cross hazards that challenge the golfer, not penalize the golfer. Contrast of brown and green on a golf course. Those pictures of Maidstone's fairways. Bounce and roll. Golf originally was a ground game. Undulation. Converging lines that lead to a sense of mystery. That doesn't require 10 bunkers on a golf hole. It just requires some simple shaping. Human scale of golf course features. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Wind. Match play. A thought-provoking second shot on a par 5. How many par 5s have we played where it's a no-brainer to hit your second shot as far as you can? But a simple recontouring of a fairway, one additional bunker in the second landing area, shaping of a fairway line a little bit could really change the challenge of a particular golf hole, and in a very inexpensive way. A drivable par 4. We've seen that now in the last 5 or 6 years. Almost every tour event, every U.S. Open, there's a drivable par 4. And I think it's great for us as golfers, forget them, but for us as golfers, especially short knockers like Jim and I, to have a drivable par 4 to go after. Jim calls it a par 3. 120-yard par 3, perhaps, to his postage stamp green. Distance isn't always the name of the game. The challenge of just hitting the ball flush. We've all experienced that at least once in our lives, and it's a challenge. Solitude within nature. Strategy over aesthetics. And go back to that solitude within nature a little bit. It's very simple. We don't have to create an artificial environment from the first tee to the 18th green, from property line to property line. We should allow nature to influence conditioning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the simplicity of golf course design. And here is Cypress Point, right after it opened, Alistair McKenzie. A golf course that isn't necessarily in the bastion of affordability, but you can see how the conditioning was back there. But the point is, there's some great design here. And nature influenced conditioning, nature influenced the design there. Here's Seminole Golf Club. Seminole was very rough in the beginning, and these guys had mentioned in the late 60s, early 70s, things had started turning. And Seminole, I'm sure, turned then. But about 10 years ago, Seminole got all the way to one side of the pendulum, where it was more like Augusta National. And Hal Hicks is the superintendent there now, and he's slowly bringing it back to somewhere like this, where he's just letting areas go. And this bunker here, the fairway is very playable, but it's very nice and rough. Okay, just like it used to be at Pinehurst in the 40s, and I'm sure Seminole in the 40s. Seminole, we all know what Seminole's about. So the challenge, when I mentioned Seminole up on the screen here, and we all think about, well, Seminole, again, is not necessarily a bastion of affordability, but you know what? If your country club that's struggling to pay your bills wants to try to ratchet back a little bit, what if we looked at places like Seminole and said, hey, if it's good for Seminole, it's probably good for 90% of the golf courses in the country. Utilizing the lay of the land. Utilizing natural features to curve your fairways around and not necessarily rely on complete reshaping of things. Undulation. To me, undulation is the most underrated hazard and the most underrated tool that a golf course architect has in his or her arsenal. Undulation can create spots and fairways without any sand or water around that can be a focal point for golfers who are looking to make birdie. If they hit it to a certain spot in the fairway, they can overcome the undulation, then they've got an advantage. But then the rest of us who are just happy to make par or bogey, they're unaffected by hazard. And here's just great undulation here in National Golf Links. It might be hard to see back there, but there's a the fairway, this is all the fairway here, but within the fairway there's a hollow there. And you want to avoid that hollow so you have a view of the green there, and that's the 15th hole. One of my favorite, probably my favorite golf course of all time now that I knocked that page off its USGA pedestal there. It's US Open pedestal, excuse me, Mass. It's US Open pedestal, White Bear Yacht Club, a Ross course in Minnesota, White Bear Lake, Minnesota. It's fantastic, and there's just rumpled fairways and undulation there, and it gives the golfer a challenge that they're not yet used to. A challenge that doesn't rely on root strength. It doesn't rely on the ability to hit a sand shot 180 yards or so. And then undulation, just a simple mound right here in the fairway. They can help deflect shots that aren't perfectly hit. But if it is deflected, it's just off target. It's not necessarily a penalty. So that's an important thing to think about. This mound here in this fairway is a simple mound. If you're going to be taking grass away and reshaping, why not put certain features in there that can give some certain challenge? And that mound there is not necessarily to penalize somebody, it's to deflect a shot and put someone off target. And if they're off target, they still have a chance for recovery. Interesting green contours. We're back at National Golf Links. You can see how low the center of this green of number 11 is, and it's got 2 high points. That's just fun golf. You got double breaking greens, and with the right green speeds, that's fun. Cross hazards. We're back at that page, but the 4th hole here at cross hazards, to me again, are the best feature, one of the best features on golf courses. And how do you create cross hazards? How do you go to a golf course that is tree lined with very little opportunity for design? Well, here's something we did at Army Navy up in DC. This was a tree lined, very narrow golf hole with bunkers on the left side. But we were able to very simply clear trees, create a ½ acre of fairway, and make those penalty bunkers on the left become central hazards. And this didn't require completely rebuilding this golf hole. In fact, all it required was rebuilding this one area of the golf hole, and we redid the bunker. So affordable solutions that can create really, really interesting design for all golfer levels. The golfer that hits at 300 yards, this golf hole is just not for them. But that's okay, because the 300-yard driver is more in the minority than the rest of us in the majority. Replacing penal hazards with central hazards. Here's a golf hole before with a bunker to the right, harmlessly to the right of a landing area, short of a landing area. Will do nothing but penalize the average golfer. The professional golfer, the low handicappers are going to hit straight down the middle. Only the high handicappers are going to hit that bunker. But why not take that bunker out and move a bunker a little bit more into the line of fire, so to speak, to challenge more golfers. But more importantly, this bunker no longer here, suddenly the lesser golfer won't be penalized. Meaningful selection of hazards. Here's where we replaced a grove of trees with bunkers. Expanding a fairway to create golf shots. To reward golf shots. You can see here's what we did here. We added a simple bunker in the fairway here. This was the old fairway here, and there was a lot of rough. But we added a bunker along the short side of the hole for challenge. But by the same token, then we also expanded the fairway and made the fairway wider in response to that. Again, a solution that's not very expensive to do. There's Jim's drivable par 4 right here. Thought-provoking par 5 second shots. This is a golf course in Pawleys Island in South Carolina. It was a Greg Norman course that we went in and redid. and we added bunkers. It's hard to see here, I apologize because it's dark, but the green's back here, and there's water here, and the second shot was pretty tame, but we just put a simple bunker in the second landing area to challenge the better golfer to think a little bit. The lesser golfer still has a wide open fairway. Human scale. There's something comforting to the average golfer, to the golfer in general, about human scale. And a lot of golf courses have overwhelming features. Huge giant mounds, and that really sort of make the golfer feel uncomfortable. And that's sort of something a little that golfers subconsciously can key in on. And a human scale is just a lot more interesting to the average golfer, to all golfers really, when they experience the place. They can relate to the features on a human scale. A sense of mystery. This doesn't cost anything really, but it's exciting for the golfer to walk off one green and just this is landscape architecture 101 really, more than golf course architecture. But a sense of mystery, walking down a path in the middle of the golf course. These little sensorial things really can create memory for the golfer, more so than the same golf hole over and over again. And that's the view you're rewarded with by following that little path up the hill. Doesn't matter if you're at Shinnecock or at Southern Pines Golf Club tomorrow morning, but that little sense of mystery that's there. And this is might just be my most favorite mound in golf course architecture. I'm a little dramatic there, but this is Yale Golf Club number 17, Charles Blair McDonald, Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut. And it's a par 4 that's pretty wide open. There's no sand in the fairway, but there's just one rise in the fairway that takes a green that's pretty wide open and makes it a little mysterious. It makes you wonder, did I hit my approach shot close to the pin? Am I even on the green? Just that little thought, that sense of mystery, keeping the answers away from you just a little bit longer. And that doesn't cost a lot of money. And you get it a little rough there, and you can cut down on maintenance costs. Green approaches. Not every green, and this goes back to what Ed said earlier, not every single green needs to be protected by sand. And lots of greens can have no sand at all and still be challenging. Now, I'm not advocating that every green and every fairway meet on a flat plane. But for variety's sake, there's nothing wrong with that. And it promotes a ground game again. No reason that golfers in general can't have more challenge short game-wise than a flop wedge. How about a putter, or a 4-iron, or a 7-iron, or a 9-iron from the middle of the fairway? National Golf Links here, this is the second hole at National, and you can see a steep slope. A lot of people would say that's unfair because when we hit our tee shots in front of the green, it ricochets off the back of the green. Well, what about maybe that's approach shot actually. What about that creating the thought that maybe, strategically, if we hit our approach shot 15 yards short of the green and let it trickle onto the green, there's strategy. Okay? It doesn't involve a lot of sand. It doesn't involve brute strength. It just involves thought process. Working around natural features. Maidstone, again, look at how wide open, how shorter, when you have more of a challenge, you've got more variety from a shorter distance. Moving the tees forward is a result of the golf hole being too long, not necessarily from the back tees, as I was saying before, but from other tees. So if the focus is on fun, and all these things we're talking about focusing on fun over perfect conditions, shorter golf course, we all have had more fun on a golf course that plays a lot shorter than we would admit playing. Now we're going to play a golf course here tomorrow that's 6,200 yards long from the back tees, and it's a lot of fun because we're not just hitting driver 3-wood, driver 3-wood. So I think it plays right into it. Wherever the tee boxes are, these are just fundamental principles, no matter what the length of your golf course is, long or short. And I think it's very important to promote the game and make it more affordable. Yeah.
You mentioned seek out strategy over aesthetics. How would you weigh strategy and aesthetics?
How would I weigh strategy?
In other words, if you design a hole,
Mhm.
do you ignore aesthetics? Or do you
No.
say that's 40% of the strategy that might give you?
Strategy for me is at least 75% of it. But whatever hazard that I might choose for strategy's sake, I'm going to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing. You know what I mean? I'm not, if a bunker, we're going to make it fit naturally, make it look like it was always there. Give it some sort of flair as far as its shape and its appearance, not just from above, but from where you're hitting the ball. But the difference between strategy and aesthetics is, I might make that one bunker aesthetically pleasing. I'm not adding 8 bunkers out there for aesthetic purposes. So for me, strategy is 75% of the game, but aesthetics, 75% versus aesthetics 25% or less when I'm designing. But once I have hazards in place, then it's 100% aesthetic. Of course, this beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and for me, it's about mimicking nature. Gordon. Correct. I'm talking about central hazards off the tee or in the second landing area of a par 5. Standing on the tee, where do I hit? If I hit over this hazard, I gain an advantage. So, Kevin.
Richard, what's your opinion on that some of these redesign specialists, like Ross specialists, that find original prints and they're adding bunkers that just because they're on the original, prints and sometimes they're unnecessary.
As you know, I do a lot of restoration work on Ross courses in Bellingham. I'm working on a Stanley Thompson course right now. I think that restoration, there's a big umbrella of restoration, and it depends on who your client is. If the client wants a pure restoration and that requires adding bunkers that are clearly not functional, you got to make the client happy to a certain extent. But if the client's out of the picture, and just as an architect, you have to think about who the end user is. And to put a bunch of 150-yard bunkers out, bunkers 150 yards off the tee right in front of you is going to slow play down and create difficult conditions for the lesser golfer. But if you can somehow come, if you're going in that direction, if you can balance that by maybe adding tees, of course we're getting away from perfect restoration, but if all those golf courses only had 1 or 2 tee boxes. So if you can convince the client, okay, if we want to do a pure restoration, and that usually includes bunker location, let's combat that with adding multiple tees for the modern game. And so if you have bunkers that are out in the middle of the fairway 150 yards in front of the tee, maybe there's a spot where you can place the tee left or right for the lesser golfer to try to get around that tee. Okay, I'm going to cut myself off, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. It's 10:04.
One housekeeping thing. Can I have a quick show of hands on how many folks think you might eat here across the way at the clubhouse?